This is the Happy Rant Sports podcast, in which Ted Cluck and Barnabas Piper rant about old sports, new sports, sports books, sports movies, and anything else related to sports that they feel like. Enjoy.
Hey, welcome to the Happy Rant Sports podcast. I am Ted Cluck, joined as always in studio by Barnabas Piper. And Pipe, fall is here, football season is here. Sam Darnold is here. NFL rookies are here. This is a happy time, man. And I don't know if you can relate to this as a dad and just a working person, but I don't feel like I have enough hours in the day to satisfy my thirst for all things football. So I find myself just like flipping over to like the NFL channel when my wife's out of the room for a couple minutes, and I know I won't have to conversate. And I get bits and pieces, but I don't get to go as like deep dive into all this as I want to, which is why this program is fun and why I'm excited about the next 45 minutes or so, because it gives us like some deep football time. But can you relate to that, or do you feel like satisfied in your level of, football consumption at this point?
Oh, no, definitely not satisfied. And especially because I have a clear recall of a time in life when I could have rattled off like my top 125 players for fantasy with zero mistakes. I could have, I could have ranked your top 10 rookie of the year prospects. Now, like I can't remember who the top 10 in the draft were. And that was seriously. We did a whole podcast reviewing the draft, and we did something leading up to it. And like, this is the thing we care about. And I don't know. I don't have the mental bandwidth to give it the same deep dive. So no, I'm not satisfied with myself. Or with the hours in the day that I can devote to something as important as football.
I know, man. So we're not as sharp on this as we used to be. So we'll have to kind of rely on our veteran caginess this year in fantasy. So you and I, as we discussed off the air, we're both coming out of fantasy retirements, as it were. I've been retired for about a decade. So like a decade ago, I walked away from fantasy football. I was just like, I'm too competitive. This is too much. It's making Sunday too miserable. I'm not enjoying the game anymore. But now that I'm hopefully more mature, I'm really excited to wade back into this thing, man. And Tristan, my son, he's playing in the Happy Rant League with us. He's really excited. I'm a little bit jealous of his team name. So my son's pretty clever. He's a sophomore in high school.
No kidding. That team name is special.
Yeah, he's a sophomore in high school, and he's a Lions fan. And we were sitting in my office last night. We were running down like potential names and players, and the name he came up with is theoretically speaking, but based on the name of Theo Riddick, who's like the Lions' third down back, which I was just floored by. I texted it to like 25 people. I don't think I've ever been prouder of my son. Like when he got baptized, that's up there. That's probably number one. But a close
coming up with a play on Theo Riddick is like 1B to baptism for sure.
That's pretty huge, man. Theoretically speaking, is that's good work by him. So Tristan, if you're listening, tip of the cap to you on that. But my fantasy team name, coming out of retirement, I started fresh. So a little background. I probably started playing fantasy, man, not 20 years ago, but it's probably closer to 20 years ago than recent. My team was always the Rusty Hilgers, because there was a journeyman quarterback in the league named Rusty Hilger who had like a great mullet. He wasn't very good. He had a funny name, and it sounded kind of like adjectival. So every year my name was the Rusty Hilgers, and I never had to put any thought into it. But
it sounds like a great bar name too.
Dude, right. Yeah, the Rusty. We're meeting down at the old
hang out at the Rusty Hilger.
Yeah, it's like, nickel draft night or whatever at the Rusty Hilger.
A lot of guys with mustaches drinking bad beer.
A lot of guys with mustaches, bad beer, probably some bad live music down at the Rusty Hilger. You could probably get in a fight there pretty easily if you wanted to, if you're that kind of guy at a bar. But probably
also be best friends with the guy you fought with within about 15 minutes too, because it doesn't seem like the kind of place where people are trying to beat each other to death as much as the boys just got a little carried away.
Yeah, you just want to have a fight for like the fun of having a fight.
Right.
And then before you leave, like he'll throw his arm around you like sloppily and say how much he loves you. And then you'll like
all sing "Roll Out the Barrel" and go home.
Absolutely. So that's the deal with the Rusty Hilgers. But then my kid comes up with this clever name last night, and I'm like, man, I gotta level up. This is a fresh start. I'm coming out of retirement. So I came up with Slippery When Alouette, which is a play on my love of all things Canadian football and the Montreal Alouettes and Johnny Manziel, which we'll get into in a minute. So Slippery When Alouette is my new name. My little avatar is a picture of Johnny Manziel in an Alouettes jersey, and I'm excited about it.
I was suitably impressed by that team name as well, and have been so. Can we take a minute and workshop my team name, please?
Yeah, of course, dude.
So
yeah, this is your podcast.
I too I only took a year off. I didn't take 10 years off. So I more took the call it the Michael Jordan retirement, where there was it was kind of burned out, it had a good run, maybe not quite three-peat championship run as former opponents will be sure to tell you, but I won some championships here and there. Played for a long time. And so this year I'm refreshed. I'm back. We're doing the sports podcast. So there's a different level of investment and have some listeners who we can participate with. But I have not found my legs on team names. It's just not there for me. So here's what I want to do. I picked the team logo first, and it can't change.
Got you.
And it is the logo of Randy Moss fake mooning the Lambeau Field crowd, because that was one of my proudest moments as a Minnesota sports fan. So he scores a touchdown, turns around, fake moons the fans, because apparently drunk Green Bay fans like to moon the opponent's team's bus when they're coming in and going out from games. And then Joe Buck lost his mind. It's classless, it's unbelievable, it's unforgivable, in true trying to win an SB fashion.
Dude, Joe Buck is one of the great, taking sports too seriously guys. You know what I mean? And, that's your persona. He's like...
Which is funny, because when you hear interviews with him, you're like, he seems like he seems
pretty cool.
He'd be kind of fun to hang out with, but then on the air, you're like, you're a blowhard.
Yeah.
So... that's my logo. I'm trying to workshop Moss and Moon and something into a name, and I just have a placeholder name right now. It's not even a real name. It's just those two words, basically. But that's completely unsatisfactory. So
dude, I've got one for you.
All right, help me out.
You know what? We don't have to, feel no particular obligation to even like any of these, but this one is an homage to both Randy Moss, the mooning situation, and a movie called Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery.
Are you going to get the name Randy in it somehow?
Yeah.
I was working on some of these last night, too.
Yeah, my suggestion is just feeling Randy, ? Because remember the situation in which Austin Powers is like, are you feeling hot? Are you feeling Randy? And Randy, to me, is like a great sort of British 90s way of saying horny. And I don't know, I just like it. Feeling Randy, it's really simple. You get some interesting punctuation in there, so you get a question mark in the team name, which I like. I don't know, thoughts, respond.
I was workshopping some opportunities with the word Randy as well, because here's the great thing about the word Randy is that since it's a Britishism, it may be, I don't know, it's probably super offensive to somebody in England. So to our 7 English listeners who care about fantasy football, our sincerest apologies for continuing to say it. But in America, it is Austin Powers humor at worst. And that's good. I feel like it does draw in some of that taunting sentiment, which is very important to me, especially towards Green Bay fans. It's the best on the table right now for sure. I'm not 100% sold on it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I know, man. And you know what? This can be a living document. It can kind of be a dialogue.
I really just need my team. I need my team name finalized before week 1. But up until then, we're gonna workshop this thing. It's a living document. There's gonna be some collaboration. I'm probably gonna draw in a couple other people I respect who are good at these kinds of things, and we'll see what we come up with. Maybe throw it in front of Tristan, because he seems to be just a preternaturally talented namer of teams.
He's 1 for 1 right now, man. So I'll run it by him. I'll drop him a
percentage.
Yeah, I'll shoot him a little text today at school. It'll give him something to think about besides learning Latin. So
I'm sure he would appreciate the break in the middle of Latin class. If he can think about Randy Moss mooning somebody mid Latin class, everybody wins.
Absolutely. So yeah, the fantasy naming thing is interesting because like you have to be delighted with it. You know what I mean? Like we hit that sweet spot last night, Tristan and me, where like my wife was rolling her eyes at both of us because we're both like running to the computer to like, input our perfect fantasy name, and we were delighted. There was a real sense of accomplishment. There was a
And a
sense
real
of
father-son bonding moment as well. I mean, that's a special thing to come up with the perfect play on player's name, fantasy name. Like
absolutely.
that's a strong moment.
Absolutely. It's Rockwellian. Norman Rockwell with penis,
Yes,
like both hunched over our computers, with
I
wry
can see
smiles
it.
on our faces. Yeah, absolutely. I love it. So we're looking forward to this league, man. We draft on Sunday. It's an auction draft. I've never done one of those. So I'm probably going to butcher it horribly, as will my son, but we're gonna have a lot of fun, man, and commit to this and enjoy it together. So that being said, let's stay on fantasy for a second. Piper, do you have and this is sort of a multi-part question. Do you have any players that you just absolutely won't draft? Like even if they're good, you have reasons. You have personal reasons for like not drafting a certain player. Is there anybody like that on your list, like a do not draft list?
Most of the players who I stay away from are guys who I just don't trust them. So
Yeah,
there have been times in the past where I'm like, I will never draft. This is going back a few years. I will never draft
sure,
Brett Favre. Brett Favre was never on a fantasy team of mine,
sure.
and just absolutely not. Could I kind of feel that way about Ben Roethlisberger as well?
Yeah,
That's largely for football reasons. I just feel
yeah.
like anybody who talks about retirement every offseason might not fight through injuries the way that we need him to. He
That's
does
true.
tend to miss some games.
Uh, yeah.
So
No, I get it.
he's one of
I
those
get it.
guys. And I tend to stay away from all old running backs,
Yeah, that's
even though
probably
I
wise.
love them in real football. Like
Yeah,
Marshawn Lynch is I hope he plays forever.
absolutely.
Won't touch him in fantasy, and I don't care what round it is. It could be the last round. I don't want a 33-year-old running back playing for John Gruden. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Dude, and speaking of old running backs, man, we have an Adrian Peterson sighting.
We
Adrian
do.
Peterson is back on the radar. He is signed with the Washington Redskins, and I have a deep dive Adrian Peterson thing for you, Pipe, that I want to lay on you. This may not matter to you at all, but part of my football obsession has to do with helmets, like the helmets themselves. And the NFL starting this year has banned the model of helmet that Adrian Peterson has worn his entire career. He wore it in college. He wore it every year in the pros. It's also the same helmet Tom Brady and Drew Brees wore. It's a Riddell VSR4. And basically that helmet design has been around for decades.
It's probably like what I wore in high school.
Dude, it's probably like what you wore in high school, and the NFL like shut it down. So Adrian Peterson, it's going to look weird with him wearing one of these new sort of alien-esque, ugly helmets that everybody's wearing now.
It won't look nearly as weird as seeing him in, maroon and gold.
Dude, yeah, I
That's
watched some.
awful.
I watched some of those practice clips, and I'm just like, this is a weird sort of Emmitt Smith with the Arizona Cardinals moment at the end of Adrian Peterson's career.
What's funny is I thought Adrian Peterson with the Arizona Cardinals was going to be the end of Adrian Peterson's career, but
I think
apparently
Adrian Peterson probably thought that
he
too.
oh no,
Yeah.
he's completely delusional. He still thinks he can lead the league in rushing if they would just give him the ball 25 times a game.
Dude, I love delusional old athletes. That's one of my favorite things. So I hope, dude, I hope he does lead the league in rushing. And as unlikely as that would be, the fact that it could happen in some strange universe makes me really excited that he's back. I would just love to see an old guy like that. And I'd love to see the Redskins feed him the ball a whole bunch. I don't know. It's not going to happen, but it would be really fun.
Yeah, I mean, their offense is not one that it's just not going to work because
Yeah.
they don't run an offense that's line up in an I formation or single back with two tight ends and run somebody. Like, it's not a
Dude.
power running game. And that's
So-
all he is at this point, is a power running back. He's never been a patient runner. He's not a stretch runner who can, move side to side and then
Yeah,
one cut
yeah.
up field. He's smash into the line of scrimmage, find a crease, and just explode through it if he can still explode. I think it's going to be a disaster for him, which makes me really sad because he's the second greatest Vikings offensive player ever.
Dude, right. So this is the distinctly sad thing about being Adrian Peterson is that you've been in the league. You've been around long enough to basically see football completely undergo a paradigm shift. I mean, when he was coming into the league, it was all downhill, smash mouth, run behind a fullback, feature back. The feature back was a thing. The bell cow, like 20, 25 carries a game guy was a thing. And now football moves laterally. It's touch football on the quarterbacks. The new helmet to helmet stuff is a mess. And like the game, you talk about the game passing people by as like a throwaway cliche for an old athlete, but like the game has really changed considerably since that guy came into the league, and it almost has passed him by as a function of like schemes and philosophies changing, which is too bad.
When it bothers me a lot. Well, I mean, we've talked about how there's sort of an ageism thing in the league. Once older players don't get the same respect. Now, a running back, there's usually physical reasons for that. Like they just can't do it anymore. But in other sports, guys change their game over time to adapt. It doesn't seem like guys do that as much in football, except maybe wide receivers.
Yeah.
Like Larry Fitzgerald used to be one of the best big play wide receivers. Now he's one of the best possession receivers. And as far as I can tell, he can do this for another 4 years if he wants to.
Yeah.
Even though he's just slower than everybody. Anquan Bolden, same thing.
Dude,
running backs don't do that. Like, why can't Peterson just go spend an offseason learning how to run an angle route and a circle route and catch the dang ball?
Yeah. Dude, right. And it's this weird pride thing of like, I've always been the alpha and I've always been the bell cow back. That's what I do. You know who did it at the quarterback position? And it's a short list, but Steve Young. When Steve Young came out of BYU, he was very athletic, very fast, great runner, ran a lot.
Oh yeah, I remember. I mean, he beat the Vikings early in his career with like a 45 or 48-yard touchdown run where he just left guys grasping air.
Dude, one of the best runs in NFL history. There was power in that run, there was elusiveness, but by the end of his career, he was more of a pocket passer. By nature of just having aged and his body changed, and
a really good one in terms of efficiency. He's one of the all-time greats, or at least to that era before the game changed to a total passing league.
Exactly. So there's a little bit of precedent. I think the other precedent at that position, and this is one that you'll like, Randall Cunningham. Again, early in the career, very much a runaround guy, but by the time you had him with the Vikings, he was a pocket passer. He was not leaving the pocket much as a Minnesota Viking. So interesting kind of career renaissance there for a couple of older quarterbacks.
Is it just not possible to do that as a running back because athleticism is the position? Like you can't be an unathletic running back and have a career. And so if you lose a step, you lose a career.
The Redskins actually have kind of a rich tradition of getting a lot out of old running backs. And there are several that come to mind. The first and most significant, I think, is the Diesel, John Riggins. Mm-hmm. So John Riggins, he kind of had two careers. So he was a great NFL flake of all time, too, by the way. His early career was with the New York Jets in the early 70s. He was this like unicorn freak show of a huge, white, fast running back who was a track guy at Kansas. And he was a great running back in college at Kansas. The Jets got him. He had a few good seasons with the Jets. He kind of did what we did in fantasy, and he actually stepped away. Like, I think he was out of the league for a couple of years. And then he came back with the Redskins and had this huge, like, late career run of, I'm going to get the years wrong, but probably 5 or 6 really productive feature back years with the Redskins in which he was every bit of late 30s by the end, and he was still really effective. More recently, the Redskins kind of resurrected Ernest Biner after his run with the Browns. They resurrected Gerald Riggs, who was very effective as an Atlanta Falcon. These are all really physical backs, too. And, they got a little older, and the Redskins used them. And the Redskins had great offensive lines through all those eras.
Yeah, I mean, it's even that, though. I can think about it, and I'm like, that's a little bit like a power forward in the NBA. Like,
Sure.
a guy who who can only score within 5 feet of the basket. He's kind of slow and plodding, but grabs a lot of rebounds.
Yeah.
7, 8 years ago, that guy had a lot of value. 15 years ago, he was a star. 20 years ago, he was a star. Now he's useless.
Yeah.
That's the power back in the NFL, because every player needs to be able to do multiple things. Like, you need to be able to either run the ball or pass the ball out of any set on any down. So there's no such thing as really a third down back and early down back in an effective offense. And so those guys who could have formerly extended their careers by going from 3 down back, feature back, to short yardage back or power back, nobody uses power backs anymore.
And that's essentially changed the linebacker position as well.
Yeah.
All your inside linebackers in the league are basically strong safeties now.
Yeah,
they're all just box
Eric
safeties.
Kendricks, who the Vikings just re-signed, is 6'2" and 230 pounds, and which for a linebacker would normally be considered undersized, but that's pretty standard now because he needs to be sideline to sideline and be able to cover guys.
Dude, yeah, in 1996, you were 260 as a linebacker.
Yeah,
now you're 225.
Kirkland was 280, and he was big, but
dude,
he
had one job.
Yeah.
If you were LaVon Kirkland, your purview was tackle to tackle, and you were just going downhill at fullbacks all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, just aesthetically, that's the kind of football I prefer to watch. But okay, so I know I talk about this like every episode, and I'm not going to spend much time on it. But to me, this is what makes Jacksonville fascinating, because Doug Marrone is trying to do power back, fullback, old school football in a touch football like league now, and I really want it to work for obvious reasons. I will probably overdraft Leonard Fournette on Sunday just because I like him. So back to that, my philosophy, Pipe, only players that I like. If I don't like the player, if I don't like the team, I'm not going near them even if they're good, because there's a pleasure element in this where I go, just numbers game wise, odds wise, I'm probably not going to win my league. So I have to enjoy watching the guys that I have on my team.
Yeah, and if you're sitting down on a Sunday and you have to tune into it, I don't know, whatever game, and it's a player you just can't see. That's the reason I won't draft Big Ben, because I don't want to root for Ben Roethlisberger to do what I just don't like him. I don't like him. Honestly, I won't draft Leonard Fournette because I think he's going to be a bust. We discussed that in the previous one. I don't think he's going to have a bad year in terms of 400 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah. I just think he'll average 3.8 yards a carry and score a few touchdowns and just kind of be
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know, man. I know it. Yeah, he could be he could have a Charkandrick West type season. He could have who's your backup in Minnesota? The big dude that went to the Raiders and did nothing.
Running back?
Yeah, running back.
Latavius Murray?
Latavius Murray.
He came from the Raiders, yeah.
Yeah, he came from the Raiders. Right. I got that wrong. But yeah, he could have a Latavius Murray type season.
And Latavius Murray is a good guy to get, 8 carries a game to spell your starter. He can do a few things, decent pass blocker, etc. But yeah, Fournette is a monster athlete in the wrong offense.
Fournette could be Alfred Blue. Yeah. He could have an Alfred Blue type season. And that's scary, but I'm still going to overdraft him. I
also don't tend to draft guys who are, the running backs who are being handed the starting job for the first time. Think Jerick McKinnon with the 49ers.
Yeah.
I watched Jerick McKinnon with the Vikings for several years, and he can do a lot of good things on the football field. I think if he's creatively used, he'll be productive. Yeah. He's not a game changer. He's not. He's just not.
I'm with you.
And so so the fact that in a lot of drafts he's a top 3 round guy, I'm that's purely because of workload. And it's
workload and it's Niners Kool-Aid, man. There's a lot of excitement around that team for good reason. But if
you got 1,200 total yards and 6 to 7 touchdowns out of him this year, I would be that's his ceiling in my mind.
I agree. I think that's totally the ceiling for sure. Piper, let's transition out of fantasy because we've got a couple of great listener suggested topics that I want to address, maybe just one of them on the program, but we have to do our Manziel Minute. So One of the core values of the program is talking about the CFL and talking about our favorite CFL quarterback, Johnny Manziel. Now, I reached out, Piper, to the Comeback Season Corporation, which is Manziel's company. I was hoping they would sponsor some podcast episodes and throw us some comeback season swag. Little update: I've not heard from them. They've been radio silent, so maybe because their CEO is busy playing Canadian football. But the Manziel Minute this week, the update is Johnny Manziel got super violently concussed a couple of weeks ago. It was his second start. It was a game that he actually played really well in. It was a game that Montreal almost won. He sustained a concussion running a ball in from he was scrambling and he ran to the goal line and got lit up, and they left him in the game. So whoever's doing concussion protocol for the Alouettes, probably needs to brush up on their on the books again.
So without being super familiar with the CFL and just sort of the CFL culture, in the NFL, the phrase concussion protocol is almost a joke at this point because it gets said 87 times in every broadcast. It's the theme of every article.
Sure.
Does the CFL care the same way?
Dude, so see, that's yet another reason why I love the CFL. Let's add it to the list. I feel like concussion protocol is not every storyline, and helmet to helmet concussion protocol. These are not, the form and the focus of every telecast. So the way the play went down, Manziel was scrambling. He runs the goal line. He kind of gets held up and then finished off by another dude. And it was definitely a violent looking hit, but not sort of beyond the pale for pro football. And he came, he went to the sideline because the drive was over. And then the next drive he was out there. And then, come to find out a day or two later, he's got a concussion. He's in concussion protocol, blah, blah, blah. But there wasn't a lot of dialogue about it on the telecast itself. So the update is he didn't play last week, and it's unclear as to whether he's going to start tomorrow night, but it's looking like he's not going to start again. So Manziel is on the shelf. They're playing Toronto. So this is an interesting matchup to me. Toronto is a team that won the Grey Cup last year, so they went to the Grey Cup, had a great run. James Wilder Jr. is there. Ricky Ray was their quarterback. He was knocked out for the season, I think, in week 1. So they've got quarterback issues. James Franklin was supposed to be their starter. He comes out of Missouri. And Piper, let me lay an irrational thing on you. I have a very irrational anti-Missouri bias, in which, if it's college football day or night and Missouri's on, I just don't watch the game. I just can't watch the game. I think their uniform's ugly. I think their offensive scheme is ugly. I never like any players that come out of there, and it's totally irrational. I have no reason for it other than just personal preference. So
Who's
James
the
Franklin,
last great player that Missouri put into the NFL? I mean, they've had some high draft picks, but how many of them have turned into anything good?
They have. That's the thing, and it's fascinating. So I don't know. Sean Weatherspoon was a linebacker for Atlanta for a while. I don't even know if he's still in the league.
Shane Ray went to the Broncos.
Shane Ray went to the Broncos.
Blaine
Alden
Gabbert
Smith
was a Missouri guy. Alden Smith was from there?
Yeah, he was a Missouri guy, but
is he in jail now?
I think he's in. I don't know where he is.
I think he was on Oakland most recently.
Yeah,
soon to be Vegas, whatever they're called now, the Raiders.
Dude, Vegas and Alden Smith that'll be a good marriage. He'll really clean his life up in Vegas. I feel really good about
splendidly.
That. Oh, absolutely. That's just a good town to clean up your act in,
Yeah, it's funny. I heard some people the other day, I was listening to another sports podcast, and they were talking about, some of the same concerns about moving an NFL team to Vegas. And they were like, well, it worked so well with the NHL. I'm like, you know what? There's a
Dude, hockey players are different.
Yeah, there's a cultural difference. And before anybody reads into this and thinks this is coded language, it's not racial. It's that hockey players are weirdos. They would be more at risk if you put them near a ski resort because they would try to ride the skis on their hands or something. They're just there's a different kind of insanity with hockey players. Yeah. And the Vegas Strip is not going to be that problem.
Yeah. I think hockey players are, whatever their vice is, they can kind of find that anywhere. And the vices are more simple, but yeah, Vegas
are the types who create vices out of situations. They're like, well, we've got these items. They're like the MacGyver of vice.
Dude, they are.
Whereas like
They are.
every other league, literally
Yeah.
every other league is traditional vice. They're like gambling,
It's traditional
drugs,
vices.
women, alcohol. Yes, we're in.
Yeah. And Vegas has all those things. It just seems like a disaster. It's such a disaster waiting to happen. But yeah, Missouri players. Alden Smith is probably the biggest and most successful one that I'm thinking of at this point. Although I'm sure our listeners will have input. There's probably like a really obvious guy that we've missed, but Chase Daniel.
I think they might have put in a couple decent linemen and things like that. But nobody who just stands out as like, man, that's the guy from Missouri.
You know what I mean, though? It's just like it's a college team that I can't watch. Like, I just don't like anything about it. Uniform, scheme. Do you have any teams like that you're just like, it's Missouri, Judas,
College team wise, I feel that way about Florida State.
Interesting.
I hate Florida State.
That's fascinating.
Just
why?
I think because they're, here's the thing. I liked watching Florida State in like the Warwick Dunn, Peter Warwick years.
Those were fun teams.
Back when everybody had the crop top jersey. Warwick Dunn had the little like back guard flapping when he ran away from everybody.
He was one of the first guys that had that. Yeah, everybody has it now.
They're just boring.
Yeah.
And it bothers me when the perception of a team and the quality of a team are so different. And yes, I realize they did really well with Jameis Winston as quarterback, but that's another problem because Jameis Winston is a bad dude. And like that just sort of got glossed over repeatedly. Yeah. And now he's got a 3-game suspension for something that probably deserves significantly more than that because it involves groping somebody against that person's will. And
dude, is Jameis Winston done? He's finished, isn't he? Like, I see no future there for him.
He's going to come back and be their starter, and if he leads them, so he's going to miss 3 games. And so if he comes back and plays the last 13, and they go, say, 8-5 in those games, did I get those numbers right? I'm not real good with math. I mean, somebody could take a flyer on him, but at the same time, his big problem is that there are so many other adequate quarterbacks, and he hasn't set himself apart as elite. If somebody who was Drew Brees level good was as bad of a dude as Winston, they have a future because they're that good. He's maybe middle of the pack, but at this point, with so many young quarterbacks coming up, he's probably bottom third of the league.
Dude, why hasn't Tampa traded a 2nd-round pick to the Jets for Teddy Bridgewater?
Why hasn't Jacksonville? Why hasn't Miami?
Why hasn't any team in Florida? Yeah, the whole state of Florida should be they should be like knocking themselves over to trade for Teddy Bridgewater. It's crazy. Now, Piper, real question vis-a-vis Teddy Bridgewater and your emotions. Is there any part of you that longs for Teddy Bridgewater still being in Minnesota, given how well he's played this preseason, and given how beloved
I wanted them to re-sign him to a reasonable contract, so like a 3-year, $30 million deal or something like that, and then sign a McCown type of backup, or the Trevor Siemian move that they made, like just a good, capable backup. Because I love Teddy Bridgewater. I always thought that he had the potential to be a really successful. Think like Alex Smith, but like Alex Smith last year, not Alex Smith when all he did was throw 4 yards down the field. So really smart, good leader, respected by everybody, doesn't make any mistakes, can make a lot of plays, but not all the plays, which is what the team needed. And I mean, I think Cousins is probably a better quarterback than him, but I don't know that he's a quarterback who's $20 million better than him.
Dude, he's not. He's definitely not $20 million better. And like likability-wise, he's not even close to Teddy Bridgewater. There's something just eminently likable about Bridgewater. And Cousins, it's like...
And here's the thing. Everybody in Minnesota loved him. The only reason they let him go is because there were so many questions about the future of his knee. I mean, his doctor came out in the last couple weeks and said, I'm stunned at how well he's doing. I didn't know he was going to be able to recover like this, which is... 2 things. 1, frustrating because I wish they would have known.
Exactly.
But also spectacular because I'm so happy that Teddy Bridgewater is making he's going to get a chance to play for somebody in the next year or two, and he's going to show himself to be, Jared Goff level good.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And yeah, very likable guy. Obviously, if Kirk Cousins takes you guys to the Super Bowl, this conversation will all be forgotten. But I mean, if you go 10-6, 9-7 with kind of a dorky, less likable quarterback, I don't know. It's going to be a weird moment. It's going to be a really weird moment, especially if Teddy goes somewhere and has even like a modicum of success as a starter. Like, I think if he goes to Tampa Bay and they go 8-8, they're like throwing a parade for Teddy Bridgewater in Tampa, just because that team is supposed to be so bad, and they are so bad. But if you put him on it and he kind of resurrects the season, then that becomes a really interesting narrative.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of teams who could use him right now. Either as a high-end backup because they're starters. Honestly, the team that should trade for him, and they're probably smart enough to do it.
The Rams.
I was going to say the Saints.
Okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, you're looking at two teams with like nothing behind the starter.
Well,
and there's a lot of teams.
Well, and the other thing is the Saints have a 39-year-old quarterback who, he'll play this year. He might play another year, but it's iffy. Mm-hmm. And, he could be their Bridgewater could be their Jimmy Garoppolo in the sense of a young, somewhat untested, shown flashes, which means they either trade him for a load or he replaces Breeze and the offense just keeps clicking.
Exactly. No, that's a wise move for sure. And yeah, there are a lot of teams with a good starter, but no depth, So if you are the Rams or the Saints, I mean, both those teams consider themselves to be Super Bowl contenders, I think, this year. How can you feel comfortable if you're the Rams giving the keys to Sean Mannion if Jared Goff goes down? It's a strange quarterback economy that we're in where, a Teddy Bridgewater is where he is for much longer.
It's like the value in trade has never caught up with the value of player. And so everybody will say, it's just obviously true that the quarterback is the key to a team. You can't be great in a sustainable way without good quarterback play. The best leap a team can make is from horrible quarterback play to average quarterback play. Yep. And Teddy Bridgewater is either average or above average and has the potential to be great, and nobody will offer something that will move the Jets to make the trade. I don't get it.
And this is another thing that I rant about frequently on this program, but I think there's draft pick bias in the league. So people look at a draft pick and they go, "Oh man, it's a second rounder. That's steep." But you look at the history of second rounders drafted in even the last decade, and only about a third of them pan out. So if I'm Tampa or Miami or Jacksonville, I'm looking at a second rounder I do that all day long for Teddy Bridgewater, a guy at the most important situation, the most important position on the field, who's proven that he can play and be successful in the league. Like, I'm doing that all day long because it's just a second rounder. You know what I mean? It's probably a pick that you're going to waste on a guy who's going to play a season and a half and then be out of the league. I don't know. I don't know.
And you can tell that bias is there because a second round pick has this massive value. The player picked in the second round immediately doesn't have value.
Dude, right. It's like driving a new car off the lot.
Yeah.
Like you draft a player in the second round and then you try to flip that player for something else and he has no value. But the pick itself, it's like, oh man, second round draft pick. That's a big deal. It's a lot.
Yeah. When the Cowboys took Zeke Elliott, I think it was the number 4 pick. And like the number 4 pick has this just almost inestimable value.
Yeah.
Nobody would trade the same. Like if there were teams that were like, we'll give you this year's first, a second rounder, and next year's first for the number 4 pick, which is an offer that some team would make if they want to move up. Yeah. Nobody would make that offer for Zeke Elliott. The Cowboys might be able to get a late first, probably more like a second and a future third or something like that for him. Even though he's
good.
He's good, and he was the number 4 pick.
Exactly. No, it's really crazy, man. It's really, really crazy that nobody's pulled the trigger on something like that yet. But Pipe, I've got like 6 minutes left, and I want to address one of these super insightful listener questions. And the question is, the first one, how we became fans of our respective favorite teams, and then when and how should people switch fandom? So I'll get us started. My parents are both from Chicago, and I happened to grow up in the 80s. My childhood was basically in the 80s, like when things mattered to me. sports wise. And my team then was the Chicago Bears because of where my parents were from. And, we had that great run in 1985. Walter Payton played for the Bears, my all time favorite player. Jim McMahon, who I loved. So the Bears just had a lot of guys who I loved at a time when I cared about sports. This was pre-free agency, so it meant that I wasn't going to have to see Walter Payton in a new uniform every 3 years, which I couldn't have dealt with. So that's kind of how that happens. College-wise, I actually did an open recruitment on my blog about a decade ago because I didn't have a college team that I cared about. I grew up in Indiana. I wasn't Catholic, so it wasn't a Notre Dame thing for me. Went to a small college to play, so I didn't have
Quick question. So
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who's a Notre Dame fan except for Irish Catholics, and just a few of those.
Yeah.
I know historically they've sort of owned a certain segment of the population. Is that really all just based on being white and Catholic?
Dude, yeah, I think it is, Pipe. I really think it is. So I think if you're white and Catholic, even if you live in like Phoenix, you're a Notre Dame fan. You know what I mean? Or you're white and Catholic and you live in Billings, Montana, you're a Notre Dame fan. So they do have that. But I never felt a real association with Notre Dame or any other Indiana school. So I ended up becoming a Syracuse fan like a decade ago based on this open recruitment. People sent me swag and things, inducements, similar to what we did with the Mariners in Major League Baseball.
And similar to how college teams recruit players, they basically give them really nice things and say, "Come play for us."
Dude, that's it. So I've been all in on Syracuse ever since, and I have to say it's been a really fun team to cheer for. There were some aesthetic reasons, there were some intellectual reasons. Like they have a really great journalism school, so they have great journalism, great creative writing. So I like that about Syracuse. They play in a really awesome retro dome. So they play in one of those air inflated, like the Metrodome or the Hoosier Dome. They play in one of those, which I think is really cool. Doug Marrone was there for a while. I'm a big Doug Marrone fan, just philosophically. So that's been a fun team to be with, even though they haven't done great. But what about you, Piper? How'd you become a fan of your respective team?
So I am, as Pat Conroy puts it, a victim of my geography. I grew up in downtown Minneapolis. You could hear the cheers from the Metrodome from my front yard on, spectacularly loud games. So like the 1991 World Series when the Twins won. You could hear that from my front yard, even though it was an enclosed stadium. So I just grew up in the zone of that. And nobody else in my family is a diehard sports fan. One of my older brothers loves the Twins. So he had, there was a level of influence. I remember, so 1987 when the Twins won the World Series, I was 4 years old. So I don't remember it well. Yeah. But I remember him losing his mind when Kent Herbeck hit a grand slam.
Yeah.
So those things are influential on me. Yeah. And so it is entirely geography based for me from the first 18 years of my life, which is when sports fandom is formed. Like it's not just that you're choosing a team, it's that it's sort of being woven into who you are. Yeah. So that's it for me. And which also means that I don't really care that much about two things. One is professional hockey, because the North Stars, who were a very good professional hockey team, left Minnesota when I was about 10 years old. And that means that during my formative middle school and high school years, we didn't have a hockey team, and then we had an expansion hockey team, so it's just a blank space for me, and I don't really care.
Yeah, yeah.
The second thing I don't really care about is college sports, because Minnesota has been just perpetually average to below average at football. Yep. They were really bad when I was growing up. They've been more or less average the last several years. And then in basketball, they had an epic run in 1990. It would have been the 98. I think it was the 98 Final Four. Yeah. Which then was wiped away because they cheated. Their coach cheated. I don't think the players did anything wrong that I'm aware of. But so that that sort of smudges that out, and they've made the tournament like 3 times since then. So there's just not a lot going on the college side, which means that I just don't care that much because it's not sort of woven into my fandom on that. But it's also why I can't switch fandoms. I lived in Chicago for 12 years and I've lived in Nashville for about 5, and I could not care less about the teams from these places because I'm a Minnesota sports fan because that's what I was raised in. That's me. So the idea of switching sports fandom for me is like morally, I'm not opposed to it. Realistically, I could never do it. I can't care about the Titans. The best I can do is find them interesting.
Let's talk about that for a minute. I can't care about the Titans either. And this is going to sound terrible, but I think it has primarily to do with their uniform. Their previous uniform, as we've discussed ad nauseum on this program, was one of the worst of all time. Uh-huh. But their new one, now that I've seen it 2 or 3 times in the preseason, is no better.
No,
it's a gong show. It's horrible to look at. It's horrible to see, like, moving around on the field. I just hate it. And it makes it hard for me to like the Titans, even though they have a lot of players that I like. Like Taylor Lewan's one of my favorite players in the whole league. You know, Derrick Henry, I really like Derrick Henry. I really like Delaney Walker. Like, they've got a bunch of players that I like. Kevin Byard is a player that I love to watch. Adoree Jackson, I like. I think he's got a lot of upside.
Deion Lewis is a great pickup for him.
Dude, Deion Lewis is a great. But I tell you, I have a hard time watching him. You know, that uniform is such a gong show and a monstrosity. I would have a hard time. Like, if I was a native Tennessean, if I was from the city of Nashville, that uniform would make it hard for me to, like, really care about that team. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when I see first of all, I have some thoughts about grown-ups wearing jerseys in general, but not strong feelings, just sort of eye-roll feelings.
Yeah.
And when I see adults wearing a Titans jersey, that's next level awful to me. Because I'm like, well, first of all, you've stepped back in time to when you're 14 years old. Yeah. And second of all, you have picked a jersey that is the ugliest item of clothing you could wear. I mean, wear a Hawaiian shirt and you look better than that mess.
Seriously, man. Seriously.
Yeah, the new one is, I mean, the Titans uniform, you know, sometimes if you look at a uniform, you're like, if they did this, it would be better. Here's what they can do to their current uniform to make it better. Change everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, just burn it and rebuild with a different color scheme and a different logo. Because they have a bad logo and a bad color scheme and apparently bad designers too. And it is awful.
It's really bad. It's like a Mac level alternate uniform. And Piper, I just glanced at the clock and realized if I don't get my regalia on now and start walking to the chapel, I'm going to be like super late for this thing. So,
can't do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to land the plane now. My book recommendation is a book called The Extraordinary Life of a Mediocre Jock by Ted Kluck. It's a graphic novel. It's about sports and Christianity. So check that out. Run to Amazon and grab that if you're so inclined. Piper, real quick book rec for you.
I will recommend Playing Through the Whistle, Steel, Football, in an American Town by S.L. Price. It looks at the history of the Aliquippa, Pennsylvania area, which is where a whole bunch, like an unreasonable number of NFL players have come from. And it also has it's a fascinating history of the town and like the history of the steel industry and poverty and race. And Price is a fantastic journalist, and so he does a great job. So it's called Playing Through the Whistle, Steel, Football in American Town. I loved it.
I love it, man. Piper, we have wandered to and fro. I'm going to be late to chapel, so until next time, John the Diesel Riggins.
The Happy Rant is brought to you by Resonate Recordings. If you go to resonaterecordings.com, you can see the full range of services they offer. So if you're considering starting a podcast, they are the ones we recommend going with. Again, go to resonaterecordings.com to see their prices, to connect with them and ask any questions, and to see what they can do to help you launch, edit, master, and improve your podcast. Again, go to resonaterecordings.com to see what they can do to help you launch and improve your podcast.